Vidhammer Fantasy.
Welcome back to Vidhammer. I'm Spudlow, and in this video series we're covering the September team tournament at Darkside Comics in Sarasota, Florida. This is a 3,000-point tournament where each player on a team provides a standalone 1,500-point army. But each army is only allowed to have one General's Inspiring Presence and one BSB. I'm playing my Skaven army once again, and I've teamed up with a Tomb Kings player, Brent, who I hadn't met before. Despite the unfamiliarity, we made a good team and had a lot of fun. Here's a look at the army list that we used for the tournament. I have a Grey Seer with a Dispel Scroll, a Warlock Engineer with a Doom Rocket and a Warp Energy Condenser, and my only other character is a Chieftain BSB with Skaven Brew. I'm just glad Brent didn't need a BSB, because as suspicious allies, you don't benefit from your allies' BSB, and you're still only allowed to have one per army. For my regular units, I have a block of 50 slaves, 40 Storm Vermin with the Razor Standard and a Poison Wind Mortar team, 26 Clan Rats, also with the Poison Wind Mortar, 2 Warp Lightning Cannons, and 1 unit of Gutter Runners with Slings and Poison attacks. This last unit is one that I don't normally play, and it shows as I keep forgetting about them through the course of the day. Brent has Grand Hierophant Ketep for the Tomb King side, who's the lore master for the lore of Nakara. This gives him augments, which give his units Killing Blow, +1 attack, a 5+ ward save, and an extra normal move, as well as hexes for -D3 to movement, and a -1 to both strength and toughness, and a strength 4 vortex spell as well. His other characters include a Tomb Prince with the Sword of Might for +1 strength, and the Gambler's Armor for heavy armor and a 6+ ward save. He also has a Necrotech who is naked. For units, he has 40 Skeleton Warriors, 20 Skeleton Archers, 30 Tomb Guard with the Standard of the Undying Legion, which gives them a bound spell to regain models, and finally a Casket of Souls that has a nice direct damage spell and gives us an extra D3 power dice as well. Although our shooting isn't that insanely strong, we decided we were probably going to be much better off playing a defensive game. That was certainly the case in our first match against a combination of 2 different orc armies that weren't really that different. Here's game number 1.
The scenario for this round is a battle line variant, with bonus points for killing off the highest point unit from either enemy contingent, and for killing enemy characters in a challenge. We play the rock tower terrain as impassable, and disregard the lava pools, since half of the board is lava anyways. For spells, my Grey Seer gets Plague, Vermintide, Wither, and the dreaded 13th, and I tape Warp Lightning for the Warlock Engineer. They have a level 1 Night Goblin with Gift of the Spider God on one side, and a level 4 Savage Orc Shaman with Brain Bursta, Hand of Gork, Edbutt, and Here We Go on the other. We win the roll for board edge and elect to set up on the right side of the screen. Since I've played against these opponents before and I'm quite familiar with their tactics, I know that they're going to deploy their Mangler Squigs first so they can see the bulk of our setup before they put down their infantry units. This means that we have to figure out how we're going to deploy based on the terrain alone. Given the rock towers and the fact that we want to play defensively, we decided to deploy towards the top of our side, hoping that we could keep contact to a minimum. We start off with our War Machines and the Casket of Souls. I try to get the best field of fire I can around the terrain. Then they actually put down a unit of 37 Savage Orcs. I presume this was so they could make sure that they get the spacing right for the rest of their units. Whatever the reason, it gives a rather obvious target for my slave block. They put down the first of their Mangler Squigs, so I put down my Clan Rat unit with a Poison Wind Mortar behind the central terrain, since this unit is really just a bunker for the Grey Seer and hopefully won't be seeing combat. They put down another Mangler Squig, and I put down my Storm Vermin just below my slave block. This is so my BSB can be in range of all my units, and Brent will still have enough room to deploy his army in the upper section of our zone. Another Mangler Squig comes down, and Brent places his Tomb Guard just above the Clan Rats for some power in the upper entry point. The fourth and final Mangler Squig comes down, as well as the Skeleton Warriors at the upper end of our line. The second unit of Savage Orcs goes at the top of their battle line in bus formation so they can get past the terrain. Then Brent puts down the Skeleton Archers behind the Warriors. This was a tough position for them to be in, but the upper section of the line wasn't our biggest concern. A unit of 40 Black Orcs goes above the central Savage Orcs, and all we have left are the characters. I put the Grey Seer in the bunker, the BSB with the Storm Vermin so he can give them the Skaven Brew effect, and the Engineer goes with the Slaves for now. Brent puts the Hierophant in with the Archers where it's safer, and the Prince goes with the Tomb Guard while the Necrotech goes with the Skeletons. They place their second unit of Black Orcs at the bottom of their battle line, which finalizes the overall strategy for the game. The Slaves will try to hit the central Savage Orcs, while the Storm Vermin angle towards the Black Orcs so they don't get flanked. The Skeletons have to roadblock the upper Savage Orcs, which leaves one important matchup for us. The Tomb Guard against the upper Black Orcs. The Tomb Guard are outnumbered, but if we can get the Black Orcs down before they cross the field, this is probably our best chance of winning a matchup. Their characters come down with a Black Orc Warrior in each of the Savage Orc units, the Night Goblin with the upper Black Orc unit, and the Savage Orc Shaman with the lower Savage Orcs. A second Night Goblin also showed up with the lower Black Orcs, but I don't know what spells or equipment this character has. Now, Brent was rolling like he should have been in Vegas for most of the night, so I quickly caught on to let him roll for everything we could get away with. He secures the first turn for us, and I only make a few small moves with my units to get the mortars in range before we jump into magic. There was a bit of debate at the start of the tournament as to how many power dice we were going to have each round, either 2 or 3. People had made lists dependent on both sides of this issue, so when we finally decided on just 2 dice, some modifications had to be made. Nothing changed for our table, but since the Skaven and Tomb Kings are only suspicious allies, we had to decide how we were going to split up our power dice at the start of each phase. Winds of Magic and Channeling ended up giving us 12 power dice against 6 Dispel dice. Then I remembered to roll for my Warpstone tokens and got 1, and my Skaven Brew, which backfired and killed off 3 of my Storm Vermin. Back to Magic, we decided to split evenly and each take 6 dice. I used 2 dice for Warp Lightning, and for some reason I aimed this at the central Black Orcs. I end up killing off 5 guys, but in retrospect, that really should have been aimed at one of the Mangler Squigs, as there were plenty to choose from. Since the only other spell of mine with range was the dreaded 13th, I use 4 dice and try for Irresistible Force on the same Black Orcs. Rather silly of me to try this before Brent's spells, since if the spell had gone off, it most likely would have taken dice out of the power pool, which, as we find out later, takes your comrade's dice away as well. For the Tomb Kings, he uses 4 dice to give the archers +1 attack, and the remaining 2 dice for the Casket's Light of Death, but with 6 dice to dispel, they didn't even need to roll. On to shooting, the first mortar is only in range of the Savage Orcs, and the second one shoots for the Black Orcs, but both shots actually drift off. The lightning cannons should have shot for the Manglers as well, but only the lower ones were in line of sight, so they shoot for the Black Orcs again, with the first killing 4, and the second misfiring and actually taking out 2 Skeleton Warriors. For the Orcs' turn, the Manglers dart forward as the battle line makes a quick step. Magic ends up 10-7 as I realize that I didn't deploy my Gutter Runners. They let me put them down on the bottom of our line, but I don't think they were going to accomplish much in this game anyways. For spells, the Orcs use 4 dice for Edbutt and get a range of 14 inches, which after considerable debate ends up just outside of range of the Warlock Engineer. They use the last 6 dice for Hand of Gork to try to get the lower Black Orcs behind our battle line, but they get a low casting total without Irresistible Force, and we're able to dispel it with our 7 dice. On the second turn, I've moved my units back except for the gunner runners that move up just in range of the Mangler Squig. Magic ends up 12 to 6 again, and we take another even split of the dice. Brent starts out with 4 dice for the Incantation of Vengeance on the upper Savage Orcs. This lowers their movement by a d3 and forces dangerous terrain tests. A perfect spell to help keep those Savage Orcs off of us, but the range reduction ends up being a single inch, but better than nothing. I use 2 of my dice next for Warp Lightning, this time on a Mangler Squig, but it gets dispelled. I use my last 4 for Plague on the central Black Orcs, but it gets dispelled as well. With 2 uncontested dice left, Brent goes for the Casket's Bound spell, Light of Death. The lower Mangler Squigs are a much bigger threat at this point, but the Orcs use a Dispel Scroll on it anyways. For shooting, the Skeleton Archers put 2 wounds on the uppermost Mangler Squig, while the Gutter Runners take out the lowest one. The lower mortar misfires but doesn't cause problems, and the upper one hits the Black Orcs for 4 wounds. Disregarding my own strategy, I shoot the upper lightning cannon at the central Savage Orcs for 5 wounds, while the lower one comes up short on the Black Orcs. Finally, the Warlock Engineer caps off his Doom Rocket at the Black Orcs. I don't know why, but I rolled the dice, so of course it overshoots and misses everything. On the Orcs' turn, they restrain from charging. The Manglers dart forward again, with the bottom one making contact and killing off the mortar team and 4 storm vermin. For regular moves, the battle line moves up and the upper Savage Orcs only lose 2 to dangerous terrain. Magic ends up 8 to 7, looking very good for us on the Dispel side. They use their first 4 dice for Here We Go on the central Savage Orcs, but since we have no intention of charging into this unit on our turn, we just let it go. They use their last 4 for Edbutt, but get Irresistible Force, so much for our wonderful Dispel pool. He gets enough range to hit the Grey Seer, but it fails to wound. On to turn 3, our movement is really the pivotal point of the game. I want to get the Gutter Runners to the flank of the Black Orcs, but they fail their leadership, so I can't march. Instead, I move them up just to redirect them away from the Storm Vermin, but in retrospect, if I'd checked the clock and seen that another full turn after this one wasn't going to happen, I probably would have moved them up and tried to take out the Mangler Squig, thinking I would have them flee if they were charged. I move the Storm Vermin out of the charge threat from the lower Black Orcs, and the Slaves move just in front to take the Savage Orc charge. If I had thought ahead, this slave unit dying was the real difference between a win and a draw. The Savage Orcs won't kill the entire unit, but they will do enough damage so that the slaves are going to explode. Knowing that, I should have moved my Warlock Engineer out of the unit and kept everything else as far away as possible. As it happens, the slaves end up taking out a significant amount of points on our side in the end. Since the Clan Rats won't be able to back out of the upper Black Orcs' charge range, I move the Grey Seer out of that unit and put it right next to the slaves. Magic ends up 11 to 5, and Brent only takes 4 and leaves me with 7 this round. I use 3 dice for Wither, but they use all their dice to dispel it. With my last 4 dice, I cast Plague on the Black Orcs and get Irresistible Force. It takes out 10 Black Orcs, then spreads to the Savage Orcs for 11 more, but then it backfires and hits the Storm Vermin for 17. Ouch. The spell ends, but the backlash puts a wound on the Grey Seer and Warlock Engineer, and we lose the rest of the power dice. Everyone passes their panic checks as the phase ends. For shooting, the archers fail to wound the upper Mangler Squig. The remaining mortar hits the Black Orcs for 3. The lower cannon takes out the Mangler and kills 4 Savage Orcs, while the upper cannon only puts a single wound on the upper Mangler. As our turn ends, the gutter runners manage to take out 2 black orcs, which completely changes the battle on the lower half of the board. Right. Orcs turn 3, and this doesn't go well for us. The upper Savage Orcs lose 3 guys to the Black Orcs' whipping stick. The central Black Orcs charge the Clan Rats, the Savage Orcs charge the slaves, the lower Black Orcs charge the Gutter Runners, who flee, and the upper Savage Orcs charge the Skeleton Warriors. The upper Mangler takes out 3 skeletons and the Warp Lightning Cannon as it bounces into the end of the board. Magic is 9 against 5. They use 2 dice to attempt the Night Goblin's Gift of the Spider God on the upper Savage Orcs, but the spell fails. Then they use 6 more for Edbutt, but without Irresistible Force, it gets dispelled with Ketep's Scroll, which doesn't wound. In our only combat phase, the central Savage Orcs kill the Warlock Engineer and enough slaves so that the unit explodes and causes more wounds to the Savage Orcs and Storm Vermin, and it takes out the remaining Mortar and the Grey Seer. The Black Orcs beat up on the Clan Rats, but they manage to get away, and the upper Savage Orcs kill some inconsequential skeletons. As the smoke clears, we only manage to kill 2 Mangler Squigs, and with the Super Slave Explosion, we take the loss and hopefully walk away having learned something.
So that was our first round game. If you want, you can check out our second round against the Vampire Counts and the Warriors of Chaos, or our third round game against the Dwarves and the Empire. Thanks for watching this battle report. Be sure and check back for more videos each week. Do us a favor and subscribe, like the video if you want to see more, and as always, send us a comment if you have any tactics or matchups you'd like to see. Till next time from the Vidhammer crew, keep fighting.